There we go. So as I said before, since our recording wouldn't have picked it up, my name is Rae Slowik, and I'm the the education coordinator here for the Lombard Historical Society, joined by volunteer Kim White. And taking tea really is a Victorian pastime. It was a way to enjoy an afternoon with friends and family, learn the gossip, learn what's happening in your world today. So we have a few things set out on our table that we'll share with you. Probably the first one being the block of tea.
Yes, now I can, they'll
Yep.
see that?
Yes.
All right, so I'm gonna bring this block of tea over. You know, she was just saying that we have loose leaf tea, but that's not how it was always. Let me see, can they see that?
Yep. I say you should be able to see us as we talk as well. We should either be up ahead or to the side, and you'll be able to pin us as the
Very good.
the image.
So it came in these pressed blocks, and if I pull it over onto this back side here, it kind of looks like, you know, Hershey chocolate, how you can break the blocks apart, and so you would be able to take those blocks apart and be able to see it.
Yes. So it was, so when we talk about especially the Boston Tea Party, you know, sometimes you think of them throwing loose tea bags into the Boston Harbor. It's really, they're talking about those pressed kind of bricks. So tea taking has a very unique tradition. Today we're having an afternoon kind of high tea, or an American high tea, I will say, because we have a high table, and we are enjoying sweets. Kind of a British high tea would have still had the high table, but they would have had more of like meats.
Which, I mean, that's a point that you just brought up, is the high table. It was about the height of the table.
Exactly.
You know, it's kind of like when you sit at a dining room table, it is higher than if you were in the living room and you were sitting at your coffee table and it had a lower table.
Yes. So we get more into that when we talk about in our previous Victorian Tea Party. So I encourage you to check that out. But really, one of what we wanted to focus on today is Victorian ladies and their flowers. So this is a new age of leisure. We have in the Victorian era these great new technologies like the washing machine. So no longer do you have to spend hours washing your your clothes by hand. And we're really starting to see people having these more free times and starting to develop hobbies. And this really does apply more for those like middle upper class women who are able to especially still hire a maid or someone to help with the children.
Because, you know, if you're going outside and you're traipsing around in all of this nature looking for creatures and flowers and mosses and ferns, your hem is going to get a little bit caked with mud. So you're going to need some way to clean it easy.
Yes. So they definitely, having that washing machine was a very nice invention. And part of the reason that Victorian ladies really are drawn to flowers is this is seen as an acceptable science for ladies. You know, especially in the Victorian era, they really do have separate spheres. So there are very strict roles for women, very strict roles for men, and certain sciences are just not acceptable or accessible to women at this time.
And at that time, you're having a big resurgence of knowing about natural history. And the people who are doing it the most, you would have what you would call a closet scientist. And he was somebody who was always in his home and he has a study built, and this is where he's doing his research. But he sees one side of it. He's only doing kind of the dissection of a plant or an insect or whatever. And then you have these naturalists who are out in the field collecting the items to bring back to the closet scientists. And there's this whole almost kind of a competition. It's like you have the closet scientists who think that they know it all. And then you have the naturalists who are out there who understand how it all fits together and how an organism lives and everything. And now you have women are also going out into nature and they're looking at the delicate beauty that's all around them. But a lot of them are now recording and making some very important observations that are contributing to science. And there's a number of just wonderful artists that are
Yes.
women that created beautiful illustrations of plants. And you have some women that were just poetic in their descriptions of some of the flowers. And would it be okay if I
Yes.
read one of these? So one of my favorites is William Starr Dana. That was her pen name. It was also named after one of her husbands, but her name was Frances Theodore Parsons. And this is just an example of how they would describe some of these plants. So this is bloodroot, which is a wildflower. It's an ephemeral, so it's here for a very short period of time and then disappears. And it's a beautiful white flower. And this is how she describes it. In early April, the curled up leaf of the bloodroot, wrapped in its papery bracts, pushes its firm tip through the earth, and brown leaves, bearing within its carefully shielded burden the young erect flower bud. When the perils of the way are past and a safe height is reached, this pale, deeply lobed leaf resigns its precious charge and gradually unfolds itself. Meanwhile, the bud slowly swells into a blossom. And she goes on, and there's so many different, very poetic descriptions, but she would do things like on how to know wildflowers and ferns and different types of seasons. So it was just a wonderful, beautiful way of looking at nature.
Yes. And they really, at this point, we're really seeing that Victorian gardens are flourishing, and really gardening, today, like today, still has a very important part of being in the home. So we start seeing these beautiful paths. Things are, I always tend to think of, even though it's technically the wrong time period, the Versailles gardens, how it's lots of paths and very ornamental. But you also have herb gardens during this time. So the gardens that these women are cultivating are also very, medicinal, and they're interested in knowing which
Purposeful. They're very
yes,
purposeful.
purposeful. They definitely are interested in making sure that they have things that function with them. And it goes back to learning about that natural science. So they want to make sure that as they learn about the plants that are outside in nature, that the ones they have will work for them, especially in the Victorian era. We're not quite at the modern medicine era yet. We're still a little bit of ways from that. So you still are relying a lot on the women of the home to do some basic healing, especially if you're not in town like you would have been living here, kind of in Lombard. So you'll see on the screen, we have some examples that I was able to find of just beautiful herb gardens that have these paths. And we even have we have an herb garden here at the Victorian Cottage that will hopefully start growing sooner rather than later as we get into this nicer, warmer period.
And too, one of the other things about gardening, and if you've gardened, you kind of know there's kind of a spirituality, a connection with the earth. And so that's one of those other things too that makes it more acceptable for women to be able to become involved in this.
Yes, they they definitely saw gardening as something very pure and godlike. I know Linnaeus, who did a lot of taxonomy, he's one of the early ways that we categorize the natural world around us. He talks about how Adam and Eve was actually the first botanist, and he believed. And so he's really trying to draw these connections between
he was the first one to name everything.
Exactly. And so he's really trying to say that it is acceptable for women to be able to join.
And, even with Mrs. William Starr Dana, she was not initially into natural history, but she had dealt with the loss of a husband and a child, and she was in depression, and she had friends that kind of urged her in to looking at nature as a way of healing herself.
So lovely. So yes, as we have been saying, kind of this natural sciences as it, It's really a way that we look at classifying the world around us. So some of the images that you see on your screen are done by some of the women. There's a lovely book by Kramer that is Women of Flowers that these images come from. And it's really showing how they're putting detailed scientific information into these drawings. So it's not just capturing the beauty of the flower, which they certainly do. They're far more talented than I will ever be as an artist. But you can see that they have information about all the different parts of the flower. So the stem, the petals, all the internal organs, and really letting people know what these structures look like.
Yeah. And for Victorian women, I mean, it was very acceptable for you to learn music,
Yes.
for you to be able to sew, and also to paint. And so some of these were very, trained women when it came to being able to paint and illustrate.
Yes. And this is one of the ways that we were saying that they're able to challenge kind of that scientific side of their mind. And especially since, as we said during this time, other sciences were not accessible to women. And really stimulate kind of that creativity. So,
and when you look at some of these images too, I mean, it's like they'll have maybe the flower or the progression of how they look, but also some of the insects that are going to be a part of either pollinating or using it as a host plant. So some of these women have included how it fits into nature,
which is stunning. And so one of the ways is some of these watercolors. So these are just a few that I wanted to pull out and kind of highlight. You can see in that center one where it has the root structure. It has it kind of in its bulbs or its
the rhizomes, and all this.
And really just seeing how they come together. So this was a way that they're able to spend an afternoon, traipsing outside, enjoying nature, and really just being one with the universe and one with nature. And so it's really, they're submitting these works to science journals, and they're able to get published in certain cases.
And some of them were even found much later. A famous one is written by Edith Holden, and it was the Nature Notes of an Edwardian Lady. And it was something that was found later. And I'm going to come up here so you can see some of this, but she would kind of just journal and keep little notes, but she would paint little images in her books of the different little birds and the little amphibians and things that she had seen. And so it was just her own personal journal that she kept that had been found. So that was the Nature Notes of an Edwardian Lady by Edith Holden.
So we can see that, obviously flowers are captivating the women of this time. And this isn't the only kind of activity that they'll use with flowers. Flower pressing really becomes popular during this time as a way to preserve the flowers. And so you'll see that it's really interesting how you can press flowers, since the idea is that you're trying to draw as much moisture out of them and really flatten them as possible. So what they would do is they would put it on in between pieces of paper, sometimes parchment, sometimes wax paper is what we can use today.
And what I have to tell you is that when I first started working here at the Historical Society, I love books, and there were some books that were on display, just in our little bookcases. And I remember pulling one out and leafing through it, and there were flowers in the pages.
Oh.
So that some of these flowers, where they may have been sentimental, were given to you by somebody that you loved, and you put it in a book that meant something to you, and you pressed it, in there just because it was sentimental.
And it's a great way to, kind of remember the day and, have those mementos. I wonder who put those in there. And
I know, right?
It clearly is coming from someone who the day meant a lot to them. So the stories you learn And then they were also, sometimes pressed to do some of those taxonomy works as well.
Mhm.
But I think a lot of the Victorian ladies are really pressing flowers
For beauty.
for beauty and
Yeah.
sentimental reasons. And it's just like you put them between the wax piece of paper and you put them between the books and you just kind of set them and you leave them for a while and hopefully they dry out fairly quickly, but then you're able to preserve them. I know today it's really popular to do and was popular to do that with your wedding flowers, to keep those kinds of mementos for the day. So it's a really sweet activity. And then also with that is bringing the live flowers into your home. So we have flower arranging. So the images that you see on your screen are some examples of Victorian style flower arrangements. And we also have some beautiful arrangements here on the table
And
today.
of course, remember in Victorian time, more is more.
More is more.
More is more. So they would put a lot. But the fun thing about flower arranging and also with flowers is there's secret codes in them.
Mhm.
So the flowers will have a meaning in how you choose what you put in the arrangement as well. So one of the arrangements that we have here, and this is kind of funny, this morning I just picked up this center arrangement here from Jewel. I did, because did you know that there's a flower shortage going on right now?
I did not know there was a flower shortage going on right now.
Yes, I actually went to a florist and they were saying, oh yeah, we need everything we have because there's a slight flower shortage right now.
Which is not what you want for Mother's Day when
Mm.
everyone is giving beautiful flowers to their mother.
Yes. So I went over to Jewel and I picked up this particular one, and my goal was to bring it home and to see what each of those flowers that were chosen by the Jewel designers that would be in theirs. And so I was quite pleased to find out that in this particular arrangement for Mother's Day, it has a rose. And a rose is for admiration, grace, and sweetness. The hydrangea is gratitude, grace, and beauty. The chrysanthemum is happiness, love, joy. The purple aster is wisdom and royalty. The lily is for motherhood. And the carnation is for gratitude. So somebody, when they were designing these, they must have known the language of flowers when they put it together, and they did a fantastic job.
Yeah, so it's a perfect for Mother's Day.
Yeah.
And the language of flowers does have an official term. We looked up the pronunciation of it just before this. It is Floriography, which makes me think of dancing flowers, which is not necessarily a wrong image, but it's looking at the meaning of flowers and, assigning these different meanings, and that there are morals associated with flowers. And so a lot of this from my research stems with Rebecca Hay. And so that Moral of Flowers book is from 1833. So, and it is a book of botany and poetry. And one of the things that she has to say from her book is that flowers are a delight to everyone, to some perhaps merely for their beauty and fragrance, to others, independently of these acknowledged charms, for the varied pleasure, associations, and thoughts they suggest. And foremost amongst these is the assurance that they afford the exuberant goodness of God.
I wish I could still talk like that.
Yes.
They just were beautiful, and how they were wordsmiths. They were wordsmiths.
And so her entire book is really on this idea that, you can appreciate obviously the beauty of flowers, but she assigned some of these different meanings to them.
And it was something quite common back then. Even today, some of this has been used. Recently, when Prince Philip passed away, the wreath that was on his casket, each of those flowers had a particular meaning and was chosen specifically for that event.
Yes, I say, and we have an image of it later, and we'll get more in depth in that one as well.
So here is another book, and you can get a lot of these books. They're reprints. I was actually quite surprised when I found this one. It's called Floral Poetry and the Language of Flowers, and it's printed right here in Moni, Illinois. I mean, they print them up like as the day that you get them. It's quite amazing. But this one,
I say, as you get closer to the camera, just make sure you speak up since the mic is behind you.
Behind me, yes, thank you very much. So floral poetry, and it has just, it's reprints of a lot of poems, but then toward the back, it had lists of flowers and the meanings behind them. So we have the secret decoder ring to be able to figure out all of these flowers and their meanings.
Yes, and certain flowers meant certain things to different people. So as we go through some of the meanings that we have found, you may have found ones that are different meanings from other sources. And so it's not a clear cut, set in stone. And sometimes how you present a flower even changes the meaning. I know.
Even in the numbers of flowers you give.
Yes.
So if you give somebody an even number of flowers, it's like bad. If you give them an odd number, it's good. So make sure you have an odd number of flowers in your arrangement.
I didn't. And so one of the first bouquets that we have put together is a bouquet to announce your intentions. So especially with young couples in the Victorian era, they were highly chaperoned, and it was very inappropriate for a young man and a young lady to spend any sort of time together without a chaperone, sometimes even physically in between them.
Unless you're moving.
Yes, yes. And so flowers were one of the ways that they could talk to each other kind of in these secret languages. So a bouquet to announce your intentions, you might have peonies and clovers and daisies and how do you pronounce
jonquils?
Jonquils and witch hazel. So the peony means either shame or bashfulness. In this case, I choose to interpret it as bashful. So you're very shy, and you're not quite, you don't necessarily want to be brash and announce it, but that you're being cordial and very polite as you announce it. White clover means that you are thinking of the person, which is really sweet, and that they're occupying their thoughts.
And back then too, it wasn't easy to get a hothouse flower.
No.
So something like clover, which was common and easy for anybody to be able to give.
Yes.
You can have these very common wildflowers, and you can make a bouquet that meant a lot.
Yes. And so daisy, which was one of the popular, I know specifically Rebecca Hay in her book, she constantly talks about daisies and really focused on them. And it's really this idea of innocence and beauty, and that once again, that you will think of it. So that could be when you are giving this bouquet to someone, that you're hoping that they will think of your intentions and hopefully respond favorably. The jonquils is, I desire the return of your affections, which is such a sweet sentiment, especially if this is, the first bouquet that you're giving as a courting present. To put this in there is, really saying, I really want this to work out. I hope that we are able.
This is really putting your heart on your
this
sleeve.
Really is
in
like
a way.
This is the person on their knees begging for their attention.
This is definitely a bouquet you don't want thrown in the ground.
No. And then especially with the last one, witch hazel means spellbound, which is fitting for witch hazel. And so that you are captivating this person. So this is really a sweet bouquet if you're trying to woo an intended. And it's very adorable, I think. I think I would love to receive a bouquet like this.
Oh, yeah.
This would be one of the ones I would want to receive. And then maybe once they have progressed in their courtship, you will have a bouquet of love. So your amaryllis, which is in the this kind of star-shaped one, that is splendid beauty.
Oh, yes.
And then the pink carnation means women's love. So I'm anticipating this being given from a man to a woman. Morning glory is affection. Hibiscus is delicate beauty. And then petunia, I found really interesting, is that your presence soothed me.
Oh, I like that one.
Yes. So, sometimes you see people, sometimes relationships can be very loud and brash and very over the top emotions, but to receive a flower that says you are soothing to me,
yes, very comfortable,
is just kind of a sweet sentiment. One of the things the amaryllis reminds me of is something you turned me on to, one of the your favorite movie.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to.
So Kate and Leopold. I don't know if you've seen Kate and Leopold before.
I
But
say, and we are going to actually have a short. I'm going to stop sharing my screen just for one moment, because.
so that's with Hugh Jackman and Meg Ryan.
Yes. Oops, let me. Nope, I was able to. There it is. Oh, give me one moment. I know the joys of technology is always.
I'm still just impressed you can do that without glasses.
I say our computer is currently on the other side of the screen of the room from us. So
Similar bouquet for Patrice.
Yeah, get one of these, but look, you just can't tell when she's gracefully serene.
No, this will not do.
What? Why? What is wrong with this one?
The orange lily implies extreme hatred. The begonia and lavender, danger and suspicion, respectively. Every flower has a meaning, Charles. Might I suggest the amaryllis, which declares the recipient a most splendid beauty, or the cabbage rose?
So you can see that you're not always sure. I know some of you have put in our chat, wondering what you have unintentionally said to in a bouquet, which I have done.
If only your recipient knew the meaning.
Yes.
That's
that is the only time that you are really in danger.
As if you both have the secret decoder ring.
Yes. Yes. I hope that I have given none of the evil and bad intentions to someone I care about, because there are flowers of bad intentions. Which is, and some of these I find really funny. So,
and surprising.
Yes, like the apple blossom, which, especially because there is such a Christian connotation with the flower language in Victorian era, it makes sense that it stands for temptation.
Yes.
Especially if we refer back to the story of Adam and Eve. But they're so beautiful and they smell so nice and they give us such beautiful fruits. So that's not necessarily one I would necessarily jump to right away. I said basil is hatred.
Oh, and it tastes so good.
I know. It's especially being an Italian, I put basil, especially fresh basil, pretty much everything I cook during the summer. So
that'd be more of a flower herb of love.
Yes. So
passion.
It's for me, basil is not hatred. My favorite borage is bluntness and roughness of manners.
Which I can understand a little bit, because if you look at borage, the flower, the stems, it is kind of hairy looking, but it also makes for some really good pictures when you're taking pictures of it, because it makes it kind of glow.
Oh,
it's really nice. But yeah, because of that little bit of a texture on the stem and flowers, I can see that.
I say the next one we have on here is the crab tree, which we have some beautiful ones over in Lilacia Park, but it stands for ill-natured.
Being crabby?
I think that's where it comes from, which is, yes. I say, is there a website for us to refer to these meanings? So this particular one will go up on live, but there are plenty of websites that have some of these listed, and lots of resources as well.
Now the deadly nightshade. Did you know that tomato plants are part of the nightshade family?
I did not know that.
So they're part of how if you've ever crushed a tomato plant, the leaf, it's got kind of a pungent smell to it. It's a very distinct smell. And nightshade also has that, but just a little bit more, it's a little bit more strong. It's a vine, it's a weed that we have all over around here. And I know I'm pulling it quite frequently, but yes, it can be very toxic, especially to some animals and things. So I can see why that's in the bad intentions category.
Yes, and it means falsehood. So I would not want to receive deadly nightshade, because it could definitely reference either you're being cheated on or someone is cheating on you.
I think so.
So that's not a good one. Hellebore is scandal and calamity.
Oh,
So if I was to receive that, especially the nightshade and the hellebore together.
I think that might be that you got caught doing something.
Yes. So it's there are definitely ways to say terrible things to someone in flower and really,
Well, now
be very passive aggressive.
I'm curious about lavender because that can be so soothing and calming.
Yes, we have lavender tea today.
Yes.
And
so how could that be bad?
it means distrust. And
Oh.
yes. So this is really, it's a beautiful flower, and I personally would love my lavender plant, but
It helps you to sleep.
yes, in the Victorian era it meant distrust. So
There you go.
and then marigolds, which are such a pretty flower. I have
Yeah.
marigolds planted. That is grief and uneasiness.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a little strange sometimes. You often
Yeah.
wonder, especially with
I want to know who assigned that one.
yes, and so that's why when we talk about like these meanings are malleable,
Mhm.
that they truly are. That what was, especially because a lot of these are the Victorian era meaning, don't necessarily mean the same thing today. And then our mock orange has kind of a fitting,
Mhm.
in that it is counterfeit. So
Yeah.
it's not a real orange. It's just it's a counterfeit orange. But definitely these flowers of bad intentions. Well, I would not want to give or receive these. I think it would be kind of amusing to see someone else get them kind of sneakily, or if
It's like I know
what that
person was
yes.
saying.
Or if you, so I think you just see that sitting at someone like a present to maybe a terrible boss, or like maybe I think would be amusing. And then there's also, kind of flowers that are to deal with money and just these other kinds of meanings as well that don't necessarily, I consider this more of a neutral.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking at the thistle. I think the thistle isn't it one of the national flowers of Scotland, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thistle actually means austerity. So not necessarily a bad thing to be austere.
Yeah.
It could but a person might view that as an insult. So this whole bouquet, like I said, is kind of depending on who you're giving it to or who it's coming from. Like the chicory flower is frugality. So that's another one very much so in the same line as austerity.
Now the chicory flower, you're going to see a lot around here. Sometimes people go, what is that little blue flower that's growing in the median on the highway?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it's chicory, and chicory was also used to make kind of a type of coffee during the Civil War and Revolutionary War. So
yeah.
You can find that little blue flower around here this summer.
Yeah, and so the only one kind of in here that has more of a negative connotation is the clematis is poverty.
Oh.
Yes. So
maybe I shouldn't plant more of that. I'm wondering, was sunflower good?
Sunflower is false riches.
Oh no, I don't want that one either. I want the one that really means it.
I couldn't find a wealth one.
I know there is a money plant.
There is a money plant, yes. And technically our dollar bills today come from cotton, are used in the paper. So technically money grows off of a plant, but
there you go.
Not quite in the way we would like it to. There's no money tree that you can just go and pick $100 bills off of.
Not yet.
But yeah, this is a very kind of interesting.
Although tulips at one time were worth a lot of money in Holland.
Yes.
They were around the world, yes.
Especially with the specialized breeding of that, because the botanists who do all sorts of, and horticulturalists who do all sorts of breeding work, create these beautiful versions of these flowers.
All the beautiful cultivars. Yes.
So those are the ones that become quite a bit more. I see someone commented that the Day of the Dead altars usually have marigolds. So that's another thing, is that a lot of the meanings are specific to culture and time. So what, where we are, which says that, the marigolds are, grief and uneasiness.
Well, for Day of the Dead, it would be grief.
It would be grief. I don't necessarily see the uneasiness with that, but grief definitely. And then, of course, it's not just enough to have a meaning behind the flower. there are also meanings behind the specific colors of
Right.
flowers.
So a rose is not a rose.
Yeah. So
it depends on which color rose you gave somebody.
And so we typically see a lot of these, especially today, we think of carnations and roses having all of these different meanings. And so the white roses really represents that purity, innocence, youthfulness.
Which it seems fairly obvious that white would mean that.
So, I mean, that's probably why a lot of brides use it in bouquets, especially for that kind of youthfulness, purity tradition. Now, yellow roses, typically today we think of them representing friendship, joy, and caring. But in the Victorian era, it actually symbolized jealousy.
Oh.
So you can see that the meaning that's one way what we can track how the meaning has changed over time, because I would, if I was a Victorian lady, I don't think I would want to necessarily receive a yellow rose. I wouldn't want anyone to be jealous of me. Right. But obviously today, yellow roses are beautiful and a great way to mark a friendship. And then, of course, we have the traditional red rose for Valentine's Day, which is passionate in love.
Red is the color of passion.
Yes, indeed. But then, as we said, like, floriography is still very present. So this is the wreath that Prince Harry and his wife Meghan Markle, this is the one that they gave to Prince Philip for his funeral, and that they were very intentional. It's obviously a very beautiful wreath, but it has the bear's breeches flower, which is the national flower of Greece for his heritage. It has holly, since he was part of the Royal Marines. It has rosemary for remembrance. It has a more modern meaning, or a different meaning, of lavender, which is devotion.
So I like that one better.
I do like that one much better. And then the campanella is gratitude and everlasting love. So
it's a beautiful sentiment.
It really is. So this idea of, marking his major accomplishments in his life, and knowing that they are thankful and that they will continue to remember and love him, even as they continue on with their lives. So they definitely, we see that flowers still carry on those meanings, whether it is, the wreath on Prince Philip's or the bouquet from our local jewel.
Right. So there's some other flowers that we have here on the table, and they're ones from the garden that I had just gone around my garden to see what was blooming. And I'm like, I wonder what their meanings are behind them. So here I have the yellow iris, and this one is for passion.
Oh,
yeah. So I have a little passionate plot in my yard right there. Lungwort is this small blue one. It's also a plumeria. It has green leaves that are kind of spotted, but that one is for admiration, devotion, and joy. The bleeding hearts, that one is, you can let me know what you're feeling. So if you had somebody like, maybe a couple, and you're just not quite sure if you can breach, like, oh, maybe they like me, maybe they don't, I don't know. You can give them a bouquet of bleeding hearts and let them know that it's safe to talk about this. We can share our meanings with each other. Also with the plumeria, here, the little tiny blue ones, there's also some bluebells, and those are for humility, gratitude, and everlasting love.
Oh,
red tulips. I know if you go over to Lilacia Park right now, you are going to find tulips galore, and just some beautiful ones. But again, the color can be a different meaning. And for red tulips, it's eternal love. Yellow tulips are cheerful thoughts. I love that. Daffodils that we just finished blooming around here, their meaning is rebirth. It's one of the first things to bloom in the springtime. So it's a rebirth in the springtime. But we also have, being in Lombard,
we have quite a bit of connections to lilacs.
Lilacs!
So this will be the last flower that we talk about today, because it is lilac time. And so how could we not talk about the beautiful lilacs that are here and that are
we always
blooming.
think of lilac as purple because it's a color.
But lilacs actually, I believe, have 7 different classifications. They
Yes.
have, and I will be the first to admit that I have a difficult time distinguishing between some of them because they
Yes.
have colors like white and then lilac and then violet and then pinkish and then bluish and then purplish, I think, is also one.
And it's
I
weird
forget
because it's also depending on how soon it opens, like when do you count it? Because
Yes.
the color can change as the older the flower gets.
So it makes some of the meanings a little bit difficult to discern at times because these lilacs are also based on color as well. And so
in this one right here, I have a white lilac from my yard, and that again, easy, purity, innocence.
Easy to identify as well. You know, the violet lilacs are supposed to symbolize spirituality.
Yes.
And so this idea of, you know, the connection to nature that, you know, we were talking about, especially earlier in our tea, about how we connect to nature.
Which connects us to God.
Yes.
So that spiritual was very acceptable.
Yes.
In that time period.
I say blue lilacs are supposed to symbolize happiness and tranquility. Yeah, I say the only blue lilac that I can identify is there is a President Lincoln lilac, which is labeled in the park that is closer to what is that? Is that park? What is that?
There's one like the staircase that goes up from Park into right there. It's up there. And the kind of funny thing is this particular lilac is very leggy looking.
It is. And so Colonel Plum, who owned the property, he is fond of saying that like President Lincoln, it is not much to look at, but it is true blue. So we can identify that one as a blue lilac. So hopefully it brings us all much happiness and tranquility to look at. Magenta lilacs symbolize love and passion.
I can see that too.
So especially
some of my favorite colors.
Yes, they're definitely the ones who are very vibrant in their colors. And then this one is really sweet for lilac colored lilacs. It is this lighter purple that is supposed to symbolize first love.
Oh.
And so that is really just kind of sweet too, especially I believe the lilac is the flower symbolic of the 8th wedding anniversary. And so if you get the lilacs during that, you can have a beautiful bouquet of those.
So you know what I was thinking the other day? So I'm doing the tour over at Lilacia Park, and I'm looking at the 2 ones that Colonel Plum brings over.
Yes.
What color are they? White.
They're white.
They weren't even a lilac. It was a white lilac.
So thankfully he did not stop with the 2 white ones.
Absolutely.
He does get quite a number of them.
Yes.
Towards. But this is another one that the flower in general, because it is one of the first bloomers in spring, it is a kind of this renewal, rebirth is kind of the overall meaning of this lilac, or one of the meanings for it. And it is just, you know, it's a really kind of sweet sentiment. And so we do have an image on the screen that is Colonel Plum tending to his lilacs, which was a great connection between him and his wife, because she really was the one who wanted to go to the gardens where the lilacs were. And so we can owe all of this to.
And he was being dragged along, hanging onto her purse, I guess.
Yeah, apparently. And he himself admits that he was hesitant to go. So we can truly, you know, look back and see that the love of lilacs that Lombard has is, you know, really
and that
in
it
connection.
became really his passion.
And his passion is to the love of this beautiful couple. So I say we have a little bit of time left today. If anyone has any questions,
And also, if you look on that screen on the lower left, that is Sensation.
Yes.
And it's a variegated petal. It's really cool. So in that whole numbering systems, it has 2 numbers because it has the white and the purple.
Yes, and that one is located, I don't think it's quite blooming yet.
It was blooming the other day.
Is it blooming? Well, I
It
stand
is.
corrected. And that one is by
it's on the side. Yeah, it's on the sidewalk where the chain link fence is that goes parallel to the railroad tracks.
Yes. So that is one of the ones that is really easy to point out.
I think we need more of those.
Yes, and the lilacs are quite beautiful.
Yeah.
So like I said, if anyone has any questions, we are more than happy to answer them, and we very much so have enjoyed sharing our love of flowers and the secret code
And
behind
tea.
them.
And I think I'm going to need a tea cake soon.
Yes. What was the lavender tea? So the lavender tea, it is a lavender chamomile tea. Let me grab the packaging
It's
really
really
quick.
good.
It is from Tiesta Tea, and it is relaxer. And
I'll
so
take it up
it is
I'll bring it closer.
yeah, so it is really it's a very light tea, so it just has kind of it's not very overly floral, because I know sometimes, you know, when you have some of these more floral teas that it feels sometimes like eating perfume or soap, and this is just a very light kind of flavoring of it. So I highly recommend it. We've used it for programming in the past, and it's always delicious. When did the tea manufacturers steer away from the bricks? It's going to be kind of around the turn of this century, especially in this country, because
I think as we're able to move products across
Yes.
country a little bit easier. So initially it was easier and more economical to be able to
Mhm.
ship bricks than it would be loose.
Yes, because it's really compact, so you
Mhm.
need a very small amount of the brick, so to make you know, a single cup or a pot of tea. And then when we start getting into tea bags, which is Lipton creates those out of kind of the waste of making like loose leaf tea. That's really kind of just signals the end of the brick
bricks.
tea, because now we have a way where we have the tea leaves contained. You don't have to use a strainer or anything else. And so
Now we can have lazy tea.
yes.
But you know, and the bricks, you can still purchase the bricks.
Mhm.
We got ours fairly recently, and they're embossed with some really cool designs.
Yes, this I believe we got ours off of Amazon. I think is where
Mhm.
ours came from.
So you can just, you know, Google tea bricks
Mhm.
and you'll be able to find them.
Yes, they're very cool and very fragile, and they do go bad eventually. So
Yeah,
which is a little bit of a shame.
but it's good that we just look at it.
Yes. Absolutely. Does anyone else kind of have any other questions? Anything else we can answer for you today? We have enjoyed spending the afternoon with you, and it has been delightful.
And we hope that you're able to get over to Lilacia Park right now. It is so
Mhm.
beautiful, and it's just smells heavenly.
Yes.
It really does. And it's you are totally allowed to get your whole face into a clump of lilacs.
Oh, I see someone. Oh, more details of thank you, Beth. So yes, so Lilacia Park is located right across the street from us. We're located 23 West Maple Street here in Lombard. It is actually the first public park here in Lombard. It was opened in 1930, so it's
Right in the Depression.
yeah. So and the park is open from sunrise to sunset, I believe, is
Mhm.
technically park hours. And then actually right now, because we are in the middle of lilac time, which is the first 2 weeks of May, we are doing heritage tours. And so those tours are offered every day except this Monday until the 15th at 11 a.m. And you can go to our website, and which is lombardhistory.org, and register for tickets for that. But it really is Colonel Plum, who is the gentleman in the photo, like we said. He and his wife did not have any children, and so they donated the land and their lilacs to Lombard with the idea that their house would become the library, which is named for Helen, and the land became Lilacia Park. And so
I think one of the best stories though
Yeah.
that I really love is if you look at that picture of Colonel Plum there with the candlestick in the dining room. Sorry. Everybody always makes that joke. Yeah, Colonel Plum. So he was very methodical in
Mhm.
how he recorded everything about his lilacs. And the easiest way to do that was if you have things in rows. And he was a collector.
Yes.
So he collected all of these lilacs. He kept records on them. He kept records on other lilac growers, enthusiasts around the country and around the world. He was well known. And when he died and it said to make a park, well, you don't really think of a park as having a whole bunch of plants in rows.
Yes.
So Lombard kind of put the word out there that they were looking for landscape architects, and we have a number of submissions, but one stood out beyond anything else. And that was because it was from a man named Jens Jensen, who was the Frank Lloyd Wright of landscape architecture. And he could command the big bucks.
Yeah.
And
he designed Garfield Conservatory downtown, a couple of the other
Humboldt Park.
Humboldt Park, yes.
Yes, and he designed for the Ford Estates. So, I mean, to have this big name go, hey, you know, I'm going to submit something. You're going to go, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Oh my gosh, how much is it going to cost? You know, but when he was asked,
he said, would $600 be too much? And that was well within the budget. And so we actually were very
surprisingly.
Yes. So we have his original blueprint, and for Lilac Time, it is on display at our carriage house. And that's just one of the, like, him and his wife really committed to Lombard. So they ended up, his wife, Mrs. Jensen, worked at the Helen Plum Library. They lived in town for several years, and because it was a massive undertaking to convert it from what was pretty much a nursery, because he just kept his plant. He had 1,200 lilacs, I think is the number that he had, to convert that into, you know, the beautiful meandering paths that we see today.
If you've ever transplanted a bush, oh my, that's a lot of work over there. But, you know, the thing that's always intrigued me too is, why would someone that was that renowned just say $600? And, you know, Jens Jensen was part of a walking club that would come out here to the wilderness. And I just can't help but think that a world-renowned landscape architect and a world-renowned collector of lilacs had to have met.
I say that's one of the things that, you know, we can never prove, but probably.
I have,
or at least have to have known of each other.
I have a feeling that this was more than just designing a park.
Yes. I say, so I do encourage you to, you know, if you want to learn more about the specific lilacs, please come join us on one of our heritage tours. We also have information on our website about Lilacia as well. And we have some other upcoming events. In person on the 22nd, we're going to do Civil War Living History over at the Sheldon Peck Homestead. And then on May 27th of this month, we're going to have a presentation with our archivist, Jean Crockett, because May is Preservation Month. And so we've just recently launched our house walk, our virtual house walk. So that is also available on our YouTube channel. And she's going to do a talk on doing home research. So if you've ever been interested in learning about how you can do research on your house and how we approach house research, that is definitely a program for you. So those will be available on our website and on our Facebook page. So definitely keep an eye out for those. So with that, I think I will send us out. Once again, thank you all so much for joining us today. We truly do appreciate it. And I hope that you have enjoyed spending your afternoon with us. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And we hope to see you guys at future events.
And I think it's time to pass the cakes.
Time, yes. Take care.